Good morning once again, everybody. We are going to start with something more conspiratorial. So let me just get through these. The following views expressed are of personal opinion and do not reflect that of Space Consulting LLC, any of its members, employees, affiliates, you know the deal. And, at least in YouTube's sake, for entertainment purposes only. Now, give me 3 seconds. Okay. I do have bullet points this time. All right. So, when it comes to DNA testing sites, all right, all of these companies that blew up massively around the 2010s, where they got you to go out and, hand over a swab. It's normally not blood samples, but just swab of your nose, your cheek, anything in particular, trying to, get you to send in your DNA. Now, a lot of people know, of course, that there was a lot of controversy and drama tied to this. And the reasons why are simple: data breaches, selling info to the Chinese government. There was a lot of interesting places that your biological data ended up, okay? Which is a bit unnerving if you took one of those. But I would like to throw out a couple of the conspiratorial ideas that floated around my head as, these started becoming established before they largely had their downfall. And of course, half the time, a lot of people don't know, half of the time the actual report on your DNA was wrong anyway. All right, where it was conveniently biasing more and more of a percentage to, like lost tribes in Africa or something. Uncle Ruckus may in fact have been white. All right. Now, something else fundamental before we get into the actual bullet point ideas is that nothing happens in a vacuum. For things to happen, all right, whether it's these kind of DNA test sites, companies, or any of the others, all right, things don't just into existence. There is an infinite chain of planning behind anything. All right. Regardless, anybody who's deep into conspiracy theories, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There is an infinite chain. Anyway, first proposition: the elite were looking for lost bloodlines. Now, you can go biblical with this, or you can go old blood royalty that kind of vanished and vaporized. There are stories that, not given stories, fairy tales, but there are stories that the Irish civilization was really started by a fleeing Egyptian princess. All right, things like that. But lost bloodlines would be a perfect reason to really pimp and push um, DNA testing sites. Okay. In terms of the religious aspect, of course, if you're looking for the sacred blood holders of any of the apostles, Mary Magdalene, Jesus, any of them, if you could figure out exactly, what markers to look for, you might be able to find some hidden bloodlines there and then elevate or destroy people once you know that they have, rare blood in their veins. Okay. Next on the list, organ compatibility data. Because if they have, you have to understand, like, mm, just how wide the net is, like how much data you can infer from existing data, even if you don't have a set blood type. Now, of course, I've never actually used one of the DNA test kits or whatever. I know a lot of people who haven't for the same reasons. All right. You don't know what's happening with that data. All right. But a lot of people are sheep and give it freely. Like, yeah, you might not have special blood. All right. The special sauce. But it doesn't mean you should just freely give data at every single opportunity that you're asked to provide that data. You should always you should always strive in life to keep data as close to you as possible. Anyway, the idea of organ compatibility would be another big one because if you can track bloodlines, or at least if you can create a general inference of bloodlines, you can map and create charts for organ availability. What else was big in the 2010s? Information was coming out about a certain country. I suppose I should look the other way in this case. A certain country with a red flag, um, essentially having vans run across the country, picking up, people who are, essentially just, poor. All right, they could be homeless, they might not be homeless, doesn't particularly matter. But conveniently, these people would disappear forever, and a whole new set of eyes, a pair of kidneys, a liver, a heart, bits and pieces of their internal organs would end up on the market to be sold to wealthy people and for the right price, be bought up by the American medical system in order to implant in patients stuck on organ transplant lists. But especially those of any kind of wealth and power, conveniently, if they magically end up on the list, they get a replacement part relatively quickly. Okay. That being said, we'll move on to bullet point 3, biological attack profiles. So, if you get enough of a population, all right, this is one thing that's particularly, and this also ties into another bullet point. Populations homogenize over time. All right, so assuming you don't have like constant inflows of migrants, as it so happens, people go around in a free liberal democracy. People go around fucking like rabbits. Okay. And over time, over generations, you end up with homogeneity in the genetic population, which means if you get a decent amount of people to subject themselves to DNA testing, all right, and of course, you do whatever you want with their data outside of just giving them a report on where they come from. That's wrong half the time. Anyway, you can build biological attack vectors. If you know that the homogeneity is high, and you can set up biological weaponry to attack based on certain genetic markers, if you know that everybody has in a certain population XYZ genetic marker, you program it and you develop it around that, and then you unleash it on the world. Yeah. I mean, you'd never do that, but anyway, you unleash that on the entire world, and you can essentially knock out an entire population of people. Anybody who remembers the Kuf years knows that Asia took a pretty solid hit from the Kuf. All right, and I think right behind them were African Americans, and right behind them were the whites, and right behind them were, honestly, I forget. But it's a thing. Slightly different genetic base. All right, one variant of a gene ends up being predominant in Asian communities. It's slightly different in African communities, and it's even more different in Caucasian communities. Almost forgot the term for a second. Caucasian communities, so you can not just have primary impact effectiveness, but you also get radiating effectiveness all throughout the variants. Next up, just a moment. Okay. Keeping track of dysgenic action over time, genetic degeneracy over time. Okay. Essentially, this comes back to homogeneity again. Over time, you get the homogenization. All right. A genetic base that doesn't have enough radicals kind of sprinkled in there, they all become weak at the same they start becoming weak at the same times, all right? They start sharing too much in common. They all fucking break their hip at like 48 or something. They all go through a knee problem, all right? You start seeing this regular repetition, all right, of relatively similar disease weaknesses to certain diseases, um, inability for certain drugs to be able to treat these people. You end up with all sorts of problems, and that's not even taking into account like things like the rise of autism and earlier big C, all right, diagnoses. You end up with more and more likelihood of diabetes and all of this other shit. All right, there should be a little bit of intermingling. All right, but at the very least, in terms of supporting a stable culture and a stable society and civilization, you do not want to mix a lot. All right, you want to keep the cultures relatively separate with a little bit of crossover. You go to Japan or something, you bang an Asian chick, congratulations, sir. All right, that's there's no getting around that. All right, keeping track of dysgenics. All right, which mm, ties to general eugenics, but we won't really get into that. All right, next bullet point, and this one is equally suspect, at least in terms of a conspiratorial mindset. Scraping data to statistically prove success of undisclosed biological modification of the population base. So let's say you modified an organism, all right, and you specifically set that organism up to create a chain reaction, a domino effect in the genetic base of the people who consume whatever organism it is. Okay. How the hell do you know you were successful at it? Like, for instance, let's say you wanted to reduce overall, mm, let's say you wanted to increase overall sterility in a population. Now, given the socioeconomic, uh, biological factors already exist, the chemical pollution, the fact that men risen in a grown, developed in a soft society don't need a massive amount of testosterone. Obviously, their sperm counts decline. Soft times create soft men. Okay. Regardless, if you wanted to, let's say you engineered a certain staple, could be corn, could be wheat, could be the soybeans, doesn't particularly matter, but let's say you engineered it to not directly have an effect, but have an effect indirectly post consumption. All right. And that slowly over time did its damage until eventually you've successfully, created a more sterile consumer. All right. If you wanted to reduce the population, you could do something like that. But you have to prove that it's relatively effective. Otherwise, why the hell would you keep throwing money at it? All right. Let's say you wanted to increase certain rates of certain diseases, so a certain company can make a whole lot more money selling treatments to the people who consume that product, who still to this day wouldn't necessarily know that consumption of that product led to the results they got. Okay. That is, oh God, was that option 431 of the bullet points? Conspiratorial, yes. Can you write it off? You do whatever you want. But I will say this much. If they want your data, don't give it to them. If you have the option between something that is potentially polluted with genetically modified shit, um, choice is yours. Of course, cost has there's a major dependency of cost here. There are a lot of people who will still push healthy living, and it's reasonable. Though, even though, I don't talk about Neil deGrasse Tyson at all, but he did make the point that, and it's a valid point. It's a valid argument. Mr. Wine and Cheese. Anyway, it's a valid point that, people, back when humanity was getting started, they had clean water, they had clean food, they had prime protein. All right. They had all of the healthy shit, and they were still dying at 30. And it's just like, well, shit, honestly, that is a fairly decent point. But that being said, the current projections are showing that the average age, so like millennials, Gen X might just scrape by with relatively similar numbers, but of course, more free radical lifestyles might give them the edge there. But the millennial generation and on, lower life expectancy. All right, boomers could live into their 80s. Some boomers made it to their 90s, hundreds. Um, but for the younger generations, the expected age that they're going to drop is getting sooner and sooner and sooner just because of the stresses that are on them. All right. And the fact, all the pollution, everything else. Regardless, don't hand your data away for free. Ideally, try not to consume shit that may have been tainted or modulated, modified, fucked with in any way. Um, Try to push for a clean lifestyle in every aspect of life, no matter what you do. And of course, once again, this is for entertainment purposes only. You can hold me to none of this, and I will see you guys next time. Have a good one.